Great. Welcome, everybody. I'm very excited about the session today, building a culture of supply chain sustainability. And I'd really like to welcome Gareth and Emily, our presenters for today. So every supply chain professional has a duty to lead where we stand in order to address the concerns of climate change and global sustainability. SHEQ metrics and legal compliance cover the basic requirements, but there is a step change of culture needed to create around the reality that our house is on fire. And I think you can all agree our house is on fire through all the extreme global events that we've seen this year alone, and also the recent report that's been released by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We also have an opportunity to implement real-world solutions and metrics to monitor and improve our impact. Furthermore, addressing socio-economic and environmental issues through supply chain management can strengthen business operations and foster greater resilience. In this talk, Emily and Grant will share their experts, implementable examples of basic changes and also creative metrics from their experience. So Gareth has 15 years experience in the recycling and food manufacturing and distribution industries within South Africa. He is a progressive culture and change leader in supply chain and operations management. He is a certified supply chain professional and holds a joint honors degree in the Bachelor of Business Science. His goals are advancing ethical and friendly food and social development projects using circular agroeconomic models, carbon neutral, zero waste metrics, and supply chain best practice. He recognizes the importance for food and climate justice, the rights of food sovereignty, and believes that sustainability cannot be addressed without first understanding the challenges of poverty and hunger. Emily Jones has 10 years of experience in the social and environmental impact and non-profit sector. She's passionate about implementing social and environmental impact projects that are responsive to the needs of local communities and guided by Indigenous knowledge and insight. She has worked at NGOs and startup social enterprises, which have given her insight into project design and implementation according to local context and needs. She is interested in the potential of integrating mental health and coaching support into sustainability projects, and she is currently an independent project manager and facilitator. And Grant, I'm really looking forward to this session, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Liesl. And as you've said, we are presenting on building a culture of supply chain sustainability. And we all know, it's come up in this conference quite a lot between the IPCC report and global headlines, that sustainability is no longer a nice to have. It's a lifeline that will ensure we move away from catastrophic climate change. I thought I'd just share two maps with you that really drive the point home for me. The first, this map demonstrates areas in the earth that are currently uninhabitable. It's the black areas, and the gray areas are the areas that will be uninhabitable by 2070 due to temperature increases. This represents about 3.5 billion people's homes. The second map demonstrates areas in the oceans that have deoxygenated and can no longer host life, and this is also as a result of emissions as well as pollution. So for me, it's clear it's unsustainable, and as has been discussed, the situation in Southern Africa is worse, not better. So Southern Africa's temperatures are increasing at higher rates than global temperature increases, and there's projected drought, but there's also significant stresses that are not climate-based. So we have high levels of inequality, high levels of unemployment, and that leads to political instability that disrupts supply chains, as we saw about a month and a half ago. It's clear that this also needs to be addressed. As Abe Eshkenazi wrote earlier this month, without a doubt, the situation is grim, but we have the tools to make the change. And Gareth and I will be speaking today on those tools. Gareth will be taking us through building a culture of supply chain sustainability, as well as practical project-based examples. And I will take you through how to offset the emissions you're unable to reduce, as well as how to partner with local communities to ensure impact. So I'm going to hand over to Gareth.
Thanks, Emily. Can you guys hear me and see the screen?
Yes, we can. It's all perfect.
Great. So morning, everyone. I couldn't find a good meme that summed up my life, so I thought I'd create one myself. And I think one of the most important things to remember in supply chain management is to keep a sense of humor. So I realized the climate science shared by Emily and the latest IPCC reports can be deeply concerning. And we can often feel overwhelmed and anxious about how big this challenge is. But the quote from Abe refers to the fact that we already have real solutions and game plans in play. And the planet basically needs more supply chain experts to join them. So on that, as part of that, I wanted to thank the SAPEX team for acknowledging the importance of sustainable and circular supply chain management and allowing us to share some of our experiences and learnings. So as you can see, I'm not an experienced public speaker. I don't have any next-level PowerPoint skills or a viral influencer or podcaster or any sort of expert in culture or social development. But I did feel there was an important need to contribute what I could to sustainability in a South African context and convince all these everyday supply chain professionals that are on the call that we can make a small difference and lead where we stand. So if this simpleton logistics manager can initiate and develop sustainable strategies, then anyone on the call will be able to, I'm sure. So for some, I might seem quite behind in the times when it comes to sustainability. For some, it will be new knowledge, but we're all somewhere on the point of our sustainable journey. So climate change is already causing massive and devastating risk and disruption in our supply chains. We know this already. It feels often too big to comprehend or fathom. And I've often grown guilty of my contribution to the problem and felt a deep need to understand how my management decisions directly affect society and the health of our planet. So in order to do that, I did some ramping up of reading and knowledge. I'll go into what the certification that the ICSCA also provides. But to sum it in a quick one-pager, in a nutshell, sustainability that's out there at the moment. I'm still very much a newbie, and there are professionals on the conference that you can listen in on. The course that I'm referring to is the Sustainable Supply Chain Professionals Certification, and it gives a solid holistic view of the subject. So where do we start? The UNGC, the United Nations Global Compact. There's going to be a lot of jargon that we'll learn through it. Part of our culture is language, so the more we get into the language of sustainability, the more and more quicker we learn around it. It consists of 10 principles divided into 4 sections, and it focuses on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So the UNGC is the major leadership platform for development, implementation, and disclosure of responsible and sustainable corporate policies and practices. It's got over 8,000 corporate participants in over 140 countries, and it's the largest corporate sustainability initiative. You'll see the IPCC is a section of that, and that's where you'll see the climate change reports coming from. The focus areas that I'll be focusing on, Emily will focus on some of these, and you'll see them often highlighted through sustainability reporting. I'll be focusing on number 2, zero hunger, number 7, affordable clean energy, number 12, which is responsible consumption and production, and number 13, which is climate action. Another key point to remember with sustainability on the one page is the 3 Ps and the 3 Es. So the 3 Ps refers to the triple bottom line, traditionally known people, planet, and profits. There's also a 4th one considered, which is philanthropy. And the 3 dynamics of sustainability are social equity, environment, and the economy. So it's important that we always take those into consideration. So now that we know the principles, what's the next step? So how do we get in the game? How do we become team players here? And first step would be to sign up for the COP disclosure. So I didn't mention COP is the communication of progress. You would have seen those well-known meetings that are advertised where the UNGC gathers every so often to talk on the subject of sustainability and come up with plans. So that's available to everyone to sign up as corporates. And then once you're committed, using proper science-based targets to get to those metrics, right? So there's one of the major contributors to that is the Science-Based Targets Initiative and their program of business ambition for 1.5 degrees. So you'll see this 1.5 degrees quite often in the news and the background to that is basically that according to the IPCC report, that if we want to hit a maximum of limits global warming to 1.5 degrees pre-industrial levels, we need to be net carbon zero by 2050. And in order to do that, they also prescribe being halving our emissions by 2030. So those are the science-based targets that are set out. And the letter on the side here is your commitments that you can sign up for online. Those companies that are already on board, you'll see there over 700 companies have already signed up for the 1.5 degree, but overall there's over 1,700. This number is counting constantly. At the moment, it's even more than that. And the companies that have signed up already responsible for reducing 302 million tons of carbon emissions, which is the equivalent of around 78 power plants. Obviously, it's daunting and overwhelming with trying to measure and use the right metrics, so it's important you identify partners in the business. Lise will also be able to give you some guidance, as well as the ones that I've seen of late in the news is the Climate Neutral Group. They've just released a certified agri-carbon program where in South Africa, so it's the first for agricultural projects, and it's certified with the Vera VCS, or the Verified Carbon Standard. And more from carbon markets later with Emily's presentation. We are in a bit of a sad state in South Africa. We've only got, if you log on and you view the science-based targets, there's only 7 companies in South Africa that are signed up for this at the moment, 19 in the whole of Africa. But if you look in the northern hemispheres, the North America, Europe, etc., there's between 350 to 1,000 companies per region that have signed up. And basically the risks of not starting your sustainability commitments far outweigh the risks and disruptions of climate change and inequality in our supply chain. So our customers and suppliers will soon be driving this agenda if they haven't already, and it's important that you're not an industry laggard. It's proven that sustainability is a competitive advantage, and being net carbon negative can actually be profitable. So how do we do it? Tracking and measuring your progress, part of the science-based initiative targets. 5 steps: commit, develop, submit, communicate, and disclose. And disclosure is important, right? You want to share your progress. You want to show that you're hitting your targets. And that's why we have the disclose option and the communication of progress. Right, so many different viewpoints on sustainability, right? We've seen it. There's a lot of, I would say, denialists out there, maybe refusing to accept the climate science from the IPCC. They might still not be accepting what seems to be the global warming phenomenon and linking it back to carbon, and basically burying their heads in the sand to ignore it. Then there's some that might carry on their lives and continue colonizing space, technology, and farmland, and seeing the destruction of the planet as inevitable, looking for opportunities to exploit. South Africa is going to be one of the worst affected countries by global climate change. And even after all of our decades of colonialism, industrialization, it's leaving the vulnerable countries at a deficit. So the vulnerable countries will be feeling the worst effects of climate change caused by the emissions of those dubbed as the developed nations. So one of the concepts that I propose that we actually should evaluate and question whether a country can be considered as a developed nation if you had to include their weightings and metrics of sustainability and their percentage carbon contribution to the planet. Don't forget, the richest in the world may also choose to run and hide in their billionaire bunkers. And yes, it's a thing. If you Google it, you'll see. The other option, which most of us will need to engage, is be actively engaged as global citizens, commit to the 17 SDGs, keep innovative and positive, and get on board the sustainability train. Stand up and take action and keep your sense of humor. Right, so bring it closer to home. The frameworks that I've shared with you and the viewpoints, how do we get this into our organization? How do we build that culture? So it's important we use the sustainability goals as a starting point. We align our principles, visions, and values to the SDGs. Within McCain Foods, Max, our CEO in Toronto, has been very actively involved. You'll see further down in the slides. But our purpose is planet-friendly food. There's a longer description of it later. And the other mission is be good, do good. So From the top down, it's crucial that we apply it internally within our organization. We recognize the triple bottom line and the vision at executive and board level, and then cascade that down to our everyday supply chain KPIs at every level of the business. So the net zero carbon targets, the zero waste targets, your diversity, inclusion, and equality targets should be on every team member's performance plan. And that's part of how we start generating the culture of sustainability. Other aspects of culture, well, culture is our social learning, our principles and values, our food, it's in our food and in our language. And if we attempt to transform and engage our work culture, it should be an extension of ourselves and our collective principles. So our principles must be aligned to feel a real sense of purpose in our everyday work. And this is why sustainability principles need to be unconsciously embedded into everything we say and do, not only at home, but most importantly in our work environment where we commit so many hours of our life striving towards achievement. So another good example of culture is food, and by shifting our diets to less carbon-intensive food sources, it will also reduce the impact on the planet and also address food waste. The global demand for food supply can be limited and ultimately reduce emissions. So how do we do the KPIs? We can start, everyone would know the SMART setup, SMART KPI performance plan. Be specific, be measurable, actionable and achievable goals. They must be relevant to the targets that we've got, and they must be time-based. So keep a deadline on the targets that you set. So with my team, what I set up was a model of zero waste for short-dated product. Very simple model, just to keep a cheat sheet, a one-pager, easy to remember. And I'll go into the detail of that now. So the 4R model is report, recoup, redistribute, and recycle. So it's in 4 quadrants. For frozen goods, McCain supply, we have different shelf lives. You may need to reapply the timelines on these quadrants for your own company. But it basically starts in the top left quadrant. And the reporting phase is about creating transparency and visibility to the entire company. So with regards to the 4R team that we have, it's about creating a cross-functional team that includes the commercial team, your NPD, new development team, your QC quality teams, your planning teams. And we meet regularly on a weekly basis to go through the current stats on our slow-moving stock. And it's included because there's many different factors which may affect slow-moving. And at this stage, at report phase, the 3 to 6 month bucket for us, this is crucial to have a very big impact with the commercial team, to put pressure with commercial to go out and sell what is still sellable within the normal channels. And in order to give them the right visibility, we measure our forecast and rates of sale projection analysis. So we go down to SKU level, and we'll split it into the monthly bucket groups, and we'll project what targets and what stock on hand we'll land up with at the end of each projected bucket. And so the sales team will have a very clear view of how much they need to sell in order not to have stock expire on us. The MPD team is important because certain innovations don't always pay off. Some new innovations don't sell. And so it's important that you include them to understand how to manage not only the finished goods, but also the direct materials that go into it. So if they're going to discontinue any products, we need to understand what that effect is going to be on our packaging, and make sure that we run out or at least sell the packaging or some sort of recuperation on the packaging that gets sold, as well as managing the end of life cycle discounting to get it through the systems. We may need to use wholesale channels here, as well as reworking and repacking. On the second quadrant, the recoup quadrant, this is the most interesting for me. This is where we've been developing informal and residual customer networks. It's currently dubbed, if you search online, you'll see jargon such as re-commerce marketplaces. And here you might not have the support of the commercial team because deep discounting affects their GP. And the workaround with this on our SAP system, for those that speak Japanese, we've actually managed to develop a very simple way of getting around that with standard reporting. So instead of going through the normal stock sales system, we will run a financial invoice on the system and then process the stock adjustment referencing that adjustment. And by doing so, it doesn't affect the standard GP that the sales guys get measured on. So it does help them to help sell the product without affecting their KPIs as well. Other options within this space is reconstituting the product into new SKUs, such as if you're fresh, going frozen, soups, juices, mashes. And what we've done as well is work with other partners to help them make mash patties or burger patties with our veggie patties. The recoup phase also includes a nationwide staff shop network sales. So we have got partners with RCL Foods and others. Please reach out to me after this if you are interested with frozen sales. That's one of our key focus areas is staff shop sales through that space. If you don't get to move the stock before 1 month expiry, then less than 1 month, we go into the redistribute phase. Here, it's important to have, again, a national charity or NGO donations network. This isn't necessarily for your corporate social responsibility and marketing. This is making sure at an ethical level that you get the stock out to those in need in time. So it's not really for marketing to step in and do a big promo advertisement on this. This is more around making sure that we just get the food out. It's really crucial that you have your bin level and batch level stock integrity at this level, because you're going to be donating food out to the public, to the NGOs. What we also do is donate to our staff as well through staff hampers. And the crucial thing here as well is monitoring for tax purposes, your Section 18A donation certificates, for example, and working with your partners on that as well. So your transporters and your 3PLs are crucial to redistribute that stock at the least cost possible, right? If you don't, you will always have bits and pieces of product throughout the network scattered that you don't get to in time, or that you might have planned for collection that didn't get collected. And here it's crucial that you have your strong recycling project programs with waste management partners that are also a national footprint is important, because you might have stock expiring in Cape Town or PE if you're based in Joburg. And it's not always cost efficient to do reverse logistics on this sort of product. So it's crucial that you ensure that you can recycle it wherever that's with the least amount of carbon impact as possible, right? Identifying the type of waste as well. So our poly or plastic packets go for plastic recycling. Our carton board will go for pulp and paper recycling, and the organic food waste will go to fertilizer and animal feed. Here, the recycling piece was crucial, and actually this is where the start of the sustainable model was, when I realized that it was quite an industry norm to be dumping stock on and disposing for certification on the landfill, which was very disappointing for me. That's why I set up this project. And in fact, the recycling piece on that stage is either the waste management companies will collect it for free at no cost, or even pay you a small percentage if they're making enough on the recycling, but it will definitely be half or at zero cost compared to what the cost would be to sending that stock to be dumped on the landfill. So in step 2 and 3 here, recoup and redistribute, there's a new model which I'm trying to set up, and this is the next project that we're in the early stages of it, so it's a work in progress. But Hello Choice have been an online platform for agricultural trade, right? And connecting buyers and sellers, etc., and making a price competitive for small SMME farmers to get their product out in time, and creating stability and opportunities to manage marketing and also financing as well. And what Standard Bank did is, when they approached Hello Choice, they set up a solution for hunger relief and food security called One Farm Share. So this is a really exciting space that's been going, I think it's about a year old now. And it's to obviously address food security in South Africa. It was also developed during COVID when there was surplus stock, farmers' produce, and they set up the partnership with Food Forward and SA Harvest, so the food distribution partners. And currently, with the standard model they're using is Triplo with ambient stock and agricultural stock. What we've done this month is set up a frozen solution, still in the pipeline, and we're working direct trips within the McCain team, but we have a cold chain support solution for the One Farm Share that we've been working on, and the empty trips platform, which is run with RCL Foods. We are developing a process for empty backhaul transports with them. So companies like Triplo and Empty Trips are your online transport platforms, which are also very, very crucial sustainability initiatives as well. So you can invest in identifying empty backhaul trips and utilizing that space. If it is for donations, for example, with surplus food, etc., you can actually, if you were going to utilize that space on a vehicle for business, and you can utilize that space for donations, the transporters can also claim an S18A donation with governments as well. The other aspect that we're focusing on at McCain, this is the Ballarat site just outside Melbourne, a potato plant similar to our one in Dalmas. And it's the largest agricultural solar initiative in Australia to date for production. It's gone live. It's doing very well. And McCain South Africa is in the pipeline. We've already setting that up to be kicked off within the year. Other aspects around clean energy, you'll see ESG, a common term in shares and trading at the moment. I highly recommend following or subscribing to Bloomberg Green. They're keeping a brilliant tracker on all the investment that's going on out there at the moment in the world. I think it's over 70 billion by now. This tracker moves very quickly. And renewable energy, excluding hydro, is now outpacing nuclear energy investment. So this is the new big thing. The circular economy, we've got quite a few seminars on this throughout SAPIX, really good experts in the game, so please listen in on those. And McCain is very passionate about and invested in regenerative farming. If you're more into the models and the structures, like myself, the certifications, etc., you would remember the SCORE model has been developed and enhanced over the years. I think it's on score 12 now. There's a section called, it used to be Green Score. They've updated it to Sustainable Score. It's on the ASCM portal, and it's included the GRI standard, which is considered the reporting standards for sustainability. So it helps you build the right metrics wherever you are. If you in source, make, deliver, plan, and return, you can use those metrics from the Sustainable Score model. Another big investment which we're looking into is the byproduct, the waste byproduct from our agricultural processing and production, utilizing that into biogas. The biodigester is also working at Ballarat in Australia, and we're investing in that as well, potentially. We're looking at how that will work in South Africa. And you can use that to generate biogas for electricity, to offset, and even CNG vehicles, which will be your natural gas vehicles as well, to run your fleets. So this is considered as insetting if you're going to create ways of offsetting your carbon, but utilizing that offset internally within your company. Another important one is scorecarding with your suppliers and managing the RFQ, putting weighted metrics and scorecarding with the suppliers to ensure that they are also maintaining scope 3 levels of sustainability. Quick example of the sustainability report from McCain. It's built on the 4 pillars of farming, operations, food, and communities. And the importance that I wanted to show you here is these 2 targets are cascaded down to my KPI. So this is sitting on my agenda every month when I have my one-on-ones with my team. These targets we discuss obviously at the next level down to understand how we can break that into smart objectives. But they are sitting on our scorecards, and they, even if you're not a tree-hugging green vegan, you still need to be hitting the numbers if you want to achieve your salary increase or any bonuses. So it's really important that even if you don't buy into it, that at this level, the team understands that it's part of who we are as a business and what they need to take seriously in their KPIs. And the purpose of McCain is celebrating real connections through delicious planet-friendly food. So we have got a set purpose that's at the overarching vision, and it's cascaded down through as a cultural value system through to our KPIs. And that is it from myself. Let me just... So onto M. So M is going to take us through the carbon markets, as well as all the social development programs that are out there. As often, the social development programs are not often seen when you're talking sustainability. You often think green. You don't often think about the people and the social equity aspect of sustainability.
Thanks so much, Gareth. And I'm just going to be mindful of the time, so I'm going to go through this quite quickly and just give some cliff notes, because I do know that we have a strict 10 past 12 cutoff. So I'll start with an example. There is a trucking company, and he decides he's a small trucking company, and he wants to call himself carbon neutral. So he goes online to a online carbon calculator, calculates his carbon footprint, and then he knows about the spec worm that is amazing at sequestering carbon, and he decides to plant it in his uncle's yard in the Vaal. His uncle has a farm, and he calls himself carbon neutral. So as the sustainability professionals in the room will know that this is not an example of offsetting. This is an example of greenwashing, which is essentially using environmental principles to elevate your brand without having significant positive environmental impact. So when you're looking at carbon offsetting, it's a really, really contested space because of this thing that companies have been doing, which is called greenwashing. So it's really important that you get it right. And I'm just going to take you through some cliff notes as to how to get it right. As Gareth explained, we're all on different parts of our sustainability journey. So for some of you, this will be old news, and for some of you, it'll be the first time you're seeing it. So the first thing would be to ensure a credible calculation. So not going to an online calculator that is suited for lifestyle calculations or individual calculations of carbon emissions, but rather get an in-house person who's a carbon footprint analyst or an external consultant to calculate your carbon footprint. Because with an accurate calculation, you can set reasonable targets that will be meaningful, and your emissions will also mean something. If your calculation is rubbish, then so your target setting process won't be as robust. And then you've got to decide which emissions you want to calculate. As we saw in Abesh Kanazi's presentation yesterday, it's important that we start getting a grip on Scope 3 emissions, because this is where a significant amount of emissions come from in companies' operations. And then you want to decide, once you've got this reliable calculation, you want to decide where is the budget coming from for these offsets. If the budget, or firstly, you'd want to decide, are you offsetting Scope 1, 2, and 3? What are you offsetting? And, there's various discussions about the merits of trying to tackle Scope 3 because it's quite difficult to calculate, but it's important to look and see and potentially do something like McCain South Africa has done and reduce their waste, which is their Scope 3 emissions. And then you want to decide where's the budget coming from. If it's coming from your marketing budget, then you want to maybe support offsets that are aligned with the brand and are aligned with the marketing strategy. Or if it's coming from offsetting your carbon tax liability, then you want to be ensuring that you're ticking those boxes. And then you want to decide, okay, well, potentially we want to see some co-benefits. We want to see the support for offsetting projects also be generating employment, uplifting women, upskilling the youth. It depends on your overall business strategy. Once you've decided, you would offset, and then you'd submit your documents and tell the story. So a little bit more about that offsetting component. With my example, it was problematic because of the calculation. It was also problematic because the methodology of offsetting was not science-based. So it's really important, and here I'm going to just take you through the cliff notes of my presentation. It's really important that you're supporting science-based offsets that are registered with a recognized standard. These are the standards that are recognized by the carbon tax offset system at the moment. There are some other smaller standards globally, and I think it's important that if you're wanting to claim offsets, you're ensuring that it's science-based projects, then you're good to go. What you might find, and again, there's no standard cost of a carbon credit. There's no standard cost for 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalents offset. Really, the cost of a carbon credit is affected by the projects that generate those credits. So on the whole, you will find that reforestation projects are more expensive than renewable energy projects. And You might, as a company, make the decision, okay, well, actually, we're offsetting against our carbon. We're offsetting our emissions, and we're trying to do as much as possible. So we're going to go for the cheaper credits. So we're going to try support renewable energy projects in Turkey, or we don't mind paying a little bit more. And so we want to go with the local reforestation project because that's aligned to our brand. So these are just the type of things, as I've said, cliff notes that you need to think about when you're starting on your sustainability journey. And just a note that, and I'm sure this will be repeated, offsetting is not a license to pollute. It is the last resort when you cannot reduce emissions and you cannot wait for electric vehicles that are solar powered, but you've got to offset some emissions from this year. And then once you've offset, you might also want to start exploring working with local communities. So often this is what people think about when they think working with local communities as staff volunteerism. But I would say that it's really important that this is thought through incredibly strategically. And for example, if you're going to be using staff volunteerism, these guys who painting walls and building houses probably have a lot of skills that the community needs, or they have the opportunity to use their staff volunteer hours like GARETH has to set up a platform to ensure waste reduction in the food system. So how can we use our staff volunteer hours meaningfully? Another example that I think some people are familiar with when it comes to working with local communities is seeing investments go to waste. And for me, I see this a lot when I drive around the outskirts of Joburg. This is an example of a project that was implemented without the right planning in place beforehand. And if we don't get that planning right, we're going to see a lot of wasted investment. So to start working with local communities, essentially it would be to first define the geographic scope. So for example, you have a factory in Edenvale or Kempton Park. You then maybe will say, I want to work in Thokoza, Vosloorus and Katlehong. And I'll define that geographic scope for myself because, you know, we've got to get quite specific if we're going to have good impact. And then it's really important that you appoint someone on your staff to liaise with local communities and that they are trained to manage expectations. One of the biggest risks that comes with working with communities is not managing expectations properly. And I've seen projects where sponsors promise, before even approving a budget, will promise school principals new buildings. And that's one surefire way to ensure that your project will fail, is not managing those expectations. So whoever you appoint on your staff to liaise with local communities, it's really important that they're trained properly. And then you can see there's quite a few steps I recommend before even you begin implementing. It's really important to get a sense of the stats, the local stats from that area. So if we're talking about Thokoza, Katlehong, and Vosloorus, then we want to know what are the local demographics, what is the rate of housing, what is the rate of water connection, what are the national statistics and national trends that hold out locally. You want to get a sense of power dynamics. Who are the movers and shakers? Who are the NGOs who are already working there, the businesses, the churches already working there? And one great step is getting local people to define what are their priorities. So this is an example I'd like to share of a project I'm currently working on, where we've designed a youth club program. And now we've taken it to the prefects at a few of the schools, and the prefects are giving input. And they're saying, actually, no, we don't need this. How about you implement this way? And getting local input is a phenomenal tool to ensure that you are being as impactful as possible when you're working with local communities. And then once you've done your research, you would need to then put together a plan. Again, thinking about budget allocation. Where's that budget coming from? That will affect the type of project you're supporting. If it's SED, then you might want to be ticking boxes for community priorities as well as your SED. or if it's marketing, you might need to be ticking other certain boxes. You want to decide whether it's in-kind versus volunteerism versus monetary donations that you're giving. Potentially, you're going to get staff to nominate who they want to be working with, the organizations they want to be working with. And you want to look at which partners you can partner with to implement in local communities. And this I highlighted in bold because we do not need to be experts. There are experts already working in communities who have solutions. We just need to partner with them and potentially help them to take their solutions to the next level. And only then do we get to the implementation phase. So this seems like a lot of work before you get to breaking ground on whatever community project you're working on. But change moves at the speed of trust. And without a good solid foundation, you're not going to have the impact that you need. And I see Liesel's come back on because we've hit our 12:10 deadline. Thanks, Liesel.
Oh, we have indeed. Thank you so much, Gareth and Emily, and thank you for those practical tools and methodologies that we can use. So often we want to try and green our supply chain and we don't really know how to start. And there are a lot of tools and methodologies out there that we can actually use. And I think, Emily, it's great that, we need to also start taking cognizance of involving the local communities and empowering them and creating opportunities for them to become entrepreneurs in the space, especially around waste and the circular economy. So thank you so much for that. Are there any questions from the audience for Gareth and Emily while we have them here? I don't see any questions and answers. Gareth and Emily will be available in the lounge if any of you would like to continue this conversation. But once again, thank you so much for your insights. Great presentation and phenomenal work, and keep it going. I really do believe that we have a lot of opportunities in the supply chain to make a difference. Although it's not an easy task, it's doable, and this is really great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Liesel. Thanks, everyone.
Great stuff.
Thanks,
okay,
Emily.
Everyone. Great stuff. So please join to your next sessions or go to the lounge and have a further chat with Gareth and Emily. Thank you. Bye.